Welcome back to the wood shop, guys. In this week's video, we're going to build a rough lumber mortise and tenon style cabin entryway door. I actually had a customer reach out, offer me some cherry wood in exchange for building this. So if you want to see how that turns out, just stick with us. So first things first, I'm taking the cordless circular saw here and kind of just keeping everything square, making one end square at least, and kind of getting it kind of close to our final dimensions. But more than anything, taking out any kind of cracks and that kind of stuff. This particular wood was given to me very wet, very green. Of course, the owner knew this and was fine with it. Not worried about it being perfect. I actually wanted it to be very rustic, to look like it was something that was built just straight out of the woods, and I think we accomplished that. Now here you can see I've got a track saw. I usually keep it taken apart just for storage, it's easier, and so I'm putting it together. I'm going to take one edge of this rough stock and just make it straight. Of course, I end up going to the joiner later on just to refine it even farther, but the customer wanted to keep this as rustic and rough as possible. Now there are a lot of track saws on the market, from cheap to very expensive, and that's kind of just to deal with anything really. But I couldn't afford one of the more expensive ones, so we opted for this Win brand, which I've got several Win brand tools, and while they may not be top of the line, they certainly serve me well in my shop. So if you're kind of in the same boat, be sure and check out this Win track saw. Now here, doing nothing more than just making these the width that I need them to be, just ripping them down on the table saw. And once again, back to just cutting off the ends, and this time getting it square on one end and then kind of cutting it down kind of closer to the final dimensions, based on what you would call, I suppose, the stiles and the rails of this door. And that piece of wood got a little frisky and decided to smack the tripod. A little hard to do when you're filming this yourself. Now, as you can tell, I'm running a groove down the middle of this. It's going to accept the 1x material. Now the owner gave me basically 1.5 inch material, and as well as material that's probably around 3/4 of an inch, and so these are just going to be inset, as you'll see throughout the video. And here I'm laying out for the mortise and tenon. This thing is going to be ultra strong using this joinery method. You've got a lot of glue material and that kind of thing. So, but I also go and reinforce it beyond that, and so this door shouldn't go anywhere anytime soon. And making the initial cuts here, that's going to give me a line more so to cut up to. That way, that sets my edge for my mortise and tenon. And it didn't show it, but I inserted the dado stack here just to kind of speed things along. Instead of using just one blade, multiple blades are going to make it that much quicker. And just using a chisel to kind of clean up the ends there, because unfortunately I don't have the best dado stack in the world. It does leave a little bit of grooves, plus this wood being a little bit warped as it is, you get kind of uneven spots as you're running it across. So this chisel does quick work of cleaning it up. Here I'm kind of test fitting to make sure my mortise tenons are going to fit, but more than anything is just setting where they need to be cut out at. You can see here I've still actually got a bit to cut up on the mortise part of this, but I'm getting it even with the top of the door. That way I know where the bottom of it is going to be, and you can see here I'm marking that. Also here just making measurements and marks so that I know exactly how big to cut this mortise. And now that I've got everything laid out, kind of setting it up on the bandsaw, running one side, flipping it over and doing the other side. Makes quick work. Of course, I go back with a chisel later on, just kind of clean it up because I don't get exactly perfect on the bandsaw. And so after coming off the bandsaw, you can see here, it just gives me the final dimension for my mortise. And then I take it over to the mortiser to go ahead and cut that out. It was a little bit difficult, not the ends, but the center, because the mortiser that I have here is kind of close to one edge of my wall, so I had to move the mortiser itself, but it wasn't too difficult. And this thing is a game changer when it comes to hogging the material out, because the old way I had to do this was not easy. And here just taking a chisel, because it doesn't leave the most perfect edge, and so I'm just kind of cleaning everything up. And I left the tendons just a little bit long so that I, as I said to begin with, got a little extra to work with. And here, starting the first test fit, and they're a little bit tight, so I end up having to go back and clean those up a little bit, as you can see here. So after a bit of back and forth, test fitting, I got these pieces fit the way I needed, and so we're moving on to the, I guess you'd call it, inset part of the door. You'll see that more as the video progresses, what I'm talking about. But here is the thinner stock, which is right around 3/4 of an inch, and this will set in those grooves and kind of give it a decorative look as well. Now on these pieces, I'm actually getting them pretty much the final dimension as far as the length goes. I will be ripping these down. It seems like I went right around 3.5 inches, just kind of what I felt like was a good look. And as I said, just ripping these down to, like I said, we just went 3.5 inches. I felt like I could get the most out of the material in it, and it looked good as well. And the customer wanted a little bit of an arch at the top, so you can see here, I just took a piece of brown board, made an arch, and kind of curved it out, cutting it along the bandsaw, and then I just take it over to the belt sander, kind of get all the rough edges smoothed up and looking the way they should be. So now I've got all the pieces ready to go together. Here I'm adding the glue for the mortise and tenons. The first initial one wasn't too bad, just set these in here and get them lined up, get them square. And I do have to admit, for rough wood, this actually came together pretty good, especially with the fit. There's not really any huge gaps and that kind of stuff. So that was a good surprise. Just taking a pipe clamp and pulling the joint together. And this one is the centerpiece. That one actually went together really well. Just checking all these rails for square. Do this on each and every single one of these. And now the first three, or the only three, I guess you'd say, before actually hitting the inset pieces, I make sure these are all square. And I don't show it, but I leave all three of those set up actually a couple days before I would come back and started adding in the other pieces. And a little bit of test fit to begin with, but I made sure all these inset pieces were going to fit first, and then you can see me adding those in. Adding just a very light little bit of glue just to kind of hold everything together. Although they didn't really need the glue. Customer wanted this good and strong. I know, it's going to expand and that kind of stuff. So just edge glue to each other, not really to the tops and bottom. Hopefully they'll be able to move like they need to. Now these ended up not being perfectly centered from side to side, which we weren't worried about that. As I said to begin with, we were wanting this to look rustic, handmade, just basically something. If you were to make it out in the woods, building a cabin, that's what this would look like, and that's what we've done. So now came the most stressful part of this. I'm doing the other style, or edge of the door, however you want to look at that. And I had initially test fit this and it fit together, but for whatever reason, maybe I didn't get it perfect. But I started putting this together, and the top piece was off by just a hair. I don't show it, but I end up having to pull it back apart, take a chisel, and just shave off just a little bit to get that to settle in where it needed to go. As you can see here, other than a little bit of glue seeping out, it's a pretty good joint for especially rough lumber. So the glue actually set up good on this one for at least a couple of days. I just couldn't get back to it because of other things going on. And here just making my final measurements as far as width and length, of course. But here you can see I'm kind of figuring out things, how much I wanted to take off each side. I didn't feel the need to make you suffer through watching that again, so I've already got it cut down to the correct width. And the length, I'm just cutting off the very ends. As you can see, going back to the track saw, best way in the world to keep a good straight edge. And the same at the bottom. You can see here I actually left it extra long just to make sure I had plenty to work with. Now in this next shot here, you can see basically I'm drilling for a dowel, and as I said, it doesn't need this at all, but I wanted to add it just in case, you know, things, like I said, this wood being a little bit green, I wanted to make sure it stayed together the way it needs to. Now I didn't show it, but I did hit this very lightly with some 120 grit sandpaper, kind of keep it rough, but yet still show saw marks and that kind of stuff. But as you can see with this door, it actually had a lot of probably mold and dirt and that kind of stuff on it, so I wanted to clean that up and make it at least look a little better, you know, but we still had a lot of the saw marks left. And now here, just because the wood is fairly wet and that kind of stuff, it had dried out in my shop considerably, but like I said, it was cracking and warping, and so I wanted to add a little bit of moisture back to the wood, and I went with this Danish oil just to kind of preserve that wood just a little bit, and it darkens it just a little, and you can see how beautiful it makes that door as well. Now I was afraid of this Danish oil making it look too dark, but actually I think it turned out really nice. I actually love the color it gave it. Now unfortunately I am not the one installing this door, so I don't have final shots of what it's going to look like on the cabin. I may add those to my YouTube later on to the page. But what do you think about it? You know, at least in the shop, I think it looks great. Just let me know in the comments what you think about this one. Like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. We'll see you on the next video.